I don't really have a chairperson's report tonight. Should be a fairly short business meeting. We're preparing for tonight's town meeting in Manchester. We've done a lot of preparation for the town meeting in Essex. There has been some information distributed around town in Essex. We're doing our best to clear up any confusion that might have been caused. There are going to be some opportunities for some Q&A with school committee members, and I do encourage anybody who has lingering questions to reach out. We will be talking about the budget a little bit later tonight. And then we have the consent agenda, and I apologize, I don't have my computer with me, so I don't have the numbers of the warrants and the minutes that we have available for approval tonight.
We have no warrants.
No, there were no warrants. And were there any minutes?
No minutes.
And no minutes. So we actually have no consent agenda. So that's probably why I didn't have it with me. All right, subcommittee reports. Do we have somebody to talk about facilities? That would be you, Chris, if you have something to say.
So no, I don't have an update from my last update. I was on vacation last week, so I wasn't able to.
That's so nice. Is this where do you want to share about the report now?
Sure. We can just take the report in chunks.
Great.
Because my report is actually going to involve Avi giving us a little bit of update. So we do have the Gale report back, and we are working on fulfilling a couple of information requests. And the intent is to publish the Gale report when it's finalized and posted on the web. We are working with them to clear up two date mistakes that they had in the report. They assigned the wrong opening date for Brook Street and the wrong opening date for Highland. And because we're looking at age of the field, we think it's important that that's correct. So as soon as they give us a corrected finalized report, that'll be posted up on the web. But it has been shared with members of the subcommittee as well as Cheryl Marshall on the town side. And there's been some action that's come out of it. So Avi, if you could just do us a quick favor and update us on the salient points of the Gale report as it impacts the current conditions of Brook Street and the work to be done on Highland this coming week.
Sure. And I think what additions we want to do to interim. As part of that, they did a general assessment, but they also performed GMAX tests. GMAX is the industry standard for impact density, for lack of a better term, and how, for example, for like falls, hardness, essentially hardness, and infection avoidance. And so in going through the test areas, they did find a couple that needed, that were above the recommended level of 200. And they had, and we understood already that we were likely to do some interim changes over there to Brook Street. For Highland, there were no GMAX issues, but they did continue to know what we've been talking about with this year. So at Brook Street, the recommendation was to limit use and to get the or discontinue use and get the interim repairs done as soon as possible. Those were initially scheduled to be done over April break. There's been a little bit of a challenge getting that scheduled. It actually is going to start tomorrow instead. The continuing theme that we have is that everybody in this industry is very booked, and thankfully Jason has a lot of industry contacts, a lot of experience, and so we're able to pivot to find a very reputable firm that can help come in and get that done. So Brook Street is going to be worked on tomorrow. Could be a day, could be 2 days to get that repair accomplished, and then they're going to move on to Highland. So it's our understanding that with those repairs done, the GMAX issue will be addressed, and that's what's going to move forward. And the cost estimates that we talked about before still tend to be in the same ballpark. About $20,000 to $30,000 of interim repairs for both fields. It's going to be done on time and materials with the scope of work. We'll have a more accurate number shortly, but I think that's a reasonable estimate for now.
Great, thank you. I think the only other follow-up on the fields as it relates to the budget book that went out this week is the budget book on the very last page has our capital plan posted, and on the capital plan, it has our intended timeline for replacement of Highland Field. So it's broken into two sections, what has been accomplished on the bottom and what has not on top. So there was a question that I had, a great question. If we're talking about 23, 24 for Highland Field, why is it scheduled for 22? And the simple answer is because that's always been our intended date for replacement. But we're bumping up against an industry problem as well as an operational financial problem this year, which is pushing the work out to best case scenario next summer.
Yep, and we did discuss this at a couple of our subcommittee updates, which is just that even though we put the bid out to have the work done for this summer, knowing that there's a financial issue out there, we've got the bid going, and based on the timeline that the industry had told us we thought could get the work done in time for the summer, only to find out that a lot of summer 21 projects are pushed to 22 due to supply chain issues. So that meant that our project wouldn't get done anyway. So this capital needs is basically the last update that we've had across all the projects for school committee, which we did during the current budget season. So we didn't provide a new update of this, but I'm sure we'll do one the next time we do a multi-year capital plan.
I think that wraps on facilities. Finance committee.
Well, really, could we,
Sure.
sorry, I can't remember. Oh, could we have a quick update on the Eagles Nest Playground situation? And the, I went back and listened to a whole bunch of meetings because I got to go to the playground meeting because Ken wasn't available. And I thought that we had left it that if they wanted to, if the playground group that's organizing the next phase of this wanted to solicit donations, I think that what we had left it at was that they could just come to us because that there's already a policy that covers that if they were to put together their thing. It just needs to be approved by the school committee. But we were also going to try to create a streamlined kind of policy form for them. So what do we need to do still?
I guess my rec goals.
I think when we discussed it and we went back to notes, the recollection was that they presented a plan and scope of work for which they were given the okay to go forward and fundraise. So they don't need to come back if they're fundraising to execute the plan that was approved by school committee. Then there was a secondary conversation about naming rights and selling like placards for benches or memorial trees. That's where we said we have a specific naming policy. And if it's going to be a permanent object or impact future work of the site, like they dedicate a bench to somebody and they put a placard on it and now there's a project coming along and it's going to get disrupted, that those pieces should come back to school committee and flow through the naming policy. So if they're ready to name and have a game plan for that, they should come back with that. But if they're just trying to raise money for the original scope of work, they're good to go.
All is gonna, right. Yeah.
site has kind of been left in as construction thing, and my understanding of what's going to be brought in for shrubs or any of the rest of that, we can get to. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
thank you for this. No, I know, Kristen, but whatever's going to be brought in for shrubs or plants and things, I thought could be brought in, and right now it looks like it gives that. Okay, how we get, a couple $1,000s worth of lawn seed just in place.
Oh, yeah, loam and seed did come up in that little, in that working group as an issue, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I think, I was under the impression that it was part of the original scope of the phase two. And looking at the line by line, it wasn't really in there. I think partly due to the winter conditions, I don't think the full extent of what was going to be needed was fully known. And I think we, in talking through on that small group in the last conversation, and Sarah certainly pointed this out, the district wants to make sure that the site is ready, even if there was no phase two
Yeah.
work. So I think we acknowledge that the district may have some obligation to get that portion done. However, I know that Jason was working with some of the potential vendors in the community who might be donating services to see if any of them could help. And certainly there's no reason why some fundraising might not be part of that as well. So I think the answer is we're going to get it done one way or the other, and maybe it comes a little bit out of both buckets. Even though I've been hearing we say the district portion is done, in looking at the situation there, I do think that we would normally have an obligation to make sure that the landscaping is normal and sufficient and matching the other areas. So I think that might be something where we end up splitting it down the middle or what have you. So let's see how the fundraising goes, but we'll make sure it gets done.
Well, that's fair, and I'm more just concerned about being really accurate with the time of year, being like, hey, now's the time to get the dirt, put the seed down, while you don't have to water it, and focus on it, just to be like, let's get that down up, because it's a beautiful playground in the middle of an island, sea of mud and rocks, and I'm like, okay, let's just, so whatever can be done to expedite it, just because I don't know what the phase two fundraising is, a day, a week, a month, 3 months. So it's kind of like for the users. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Oh, now we have multiple things.
Go ahead.
All right. So, Finance Committee? All right, thanks. And then I know that there's no policy committee report, and we did meet ahead of this meeting to discuss negotiations, but there's no negotiation report right now. So we can go right to Pam's report.
Okay, the only thing I would add on to Matt's comments is that we did schedule another follow-up meeting this Thursday for the Finance Subcommittee, just to debrief anything that comes of tonight, and also do a last-minute preparation for Essex Town Meeting, which is next Monday. My assumption is we'll be discussing the flyer that went out, and some of the fact checking that we're doing, and how we've been trying to work to correct miscommunications.
Is that the collaborative group or just the Finance Subcommittee?
Finance Subcommittee with the town collaboration members. Yep. So that's on the books. So my, basically, since our last meeting, last week, we've been doing preparation for the meeting tonight, and of course, assisting folks with fact checking the flyer that did come out in Essex, and helping people get data sources to, the echo is throwing me off guard, to get the data sources that they needed to correct the record on things like per pupil expenditure, how we run comparables. And I think at the same time that was going out, what we hope is going to be helpful is the budget books that got mailed to all of the houses in Manchester, and then went out this week for all of the houses in Essex. So typically, they're exactly the same, with one correction that I had sent to you guys, which was there was on the MERSD at a glance page. On this one, it says 338 support staff. There was an extra 3 in there that should only be 38 support staff, but it is corrected in the online edition and to the ones that are being mailed out to Essex. The thing we did differently this year was we mailed them to Manchester, typically they go in with the Boy Scout bag. Boy Scouts go and put little bags of town meeting materials on all the doorknobs in town. Because of the vacation week and the off-cycle time of the town meeting, we actually went with the direct mail to Manchester, which is exactly what we do every year for Essex. So typically it goes out the week before each, which is why Manchester went out ahead of Essex, but it is available online for anyone who needs it. So this is really, for people who are interested, and we've been getting these questions lately, people who are really interested in the numbers and the why and the how behind the numbers, this is a great resource because it really gets into each of the subsections and explains why certain key drivers are what they are and what some of the history is behind it. And also the quick glance charts at the back give some of the comparables people are typically interested in. So thanks to Avi for pulling that together. Are there any questions on the budget book?
This comment, I'm always struck by the excellent detail in there and in the, I thought if anything, maybe it just felt like though it prepared a really good explanation in the overall tendency.
Other update tonight is just school choice is complete. We had that length discussion last meeting. We went ahead and did the lottery and followed the basic game plan that we had discussed, putting 5 students at 6th grade, 1 sibling, 4 at 7, 8, and 9. And then we were also able to enter some siblings in at, I think I said 4th grade at Memorial School, but also a lower elementary sibling as well, because the 1st grade had some excess capacity. So good news, we look like we hit our target number of 20. Primarily with the middle high school as the landing place for students. And I'm always excited when we can allow some siblings to come in and have whole family units be together. So it went very well and it was totally wrapped up before the vacation week. The other piece of reporting I have tonight is we are going to be in need of a school committee secretary by end of the year. Gale is going to be moving on to do some other things. So we can post for that in the coming weeks and put maybe the policy subcommittee together to go through some resumes and do some interviews. Or if you want to assign other people to it, you can do that as well. Probably 2 or 3 people, 4 people. I mean, I don't think we have to worry about a quorum rule for doing public interview or doing interviews rather. And that is about it on my list for tonight, unless there was something.
With the calendar.
I have the calendar. Yep. It's on its agenda item. We can just go right to it. I haven't heard anything other than the fact that typically we have, what we did this year was we realigned the calendar so that the all-day parent conferences for K-8 in November aren't sitting on a Tuesday, election day, but they've been moved to the end of the week on a Friday, which abuts the long Veterans Day weekend. So what it does is it makes November a little less choppy. Typically, we have a half day of conferences ahead of the full day of conferences. And I think that is an ask that we put that back in. It's typical, it's past practice. And I think if you're looking at class size, elementary class sizes are, 25 students over a full day is quite a bit. The half day helps them, particularly at the middle school. The teachers are looking at 90 kids, 100 kids per class. So I think they would find it helpful. So I'm just kind of floating it to you guys tonight to see if you are comfortable adding in the 10th as a half day before the full day conference day, which is how it's run for the past 12 years.
So what do we have as the conference day?
I think it's Friday. Is it Friday the 10th or Friday the 11th?
Well, the 11th is Friday's the holiday.
And it would be Thursday.
Then what's the conference day?
If the holiday is on the Friday, the conference day is the day before it.
The Thursday. So we already have Thursday off.
So it'd be a
we're
half day
talking
Wednesday.
Day Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off.
Yep. We're meeting again next Monday, so if you're not comfortable deciding tonight, you don't have to. But that would make it consistent with past schedules.
That's hard because Thanksgiving is 2 weeks later and we have another 2.5 day week.
Right. If we were to revert to what we had this year, we would have a half day on the Monday before election day and then a full day off on election day. So it's really just taking what we have now and reconfiguring it so it's tight to a weekend and doesn't chop up a full week. Again, if you're not comfortable talking about it tonight or voting on it tonight, we can just,
Why do we have a full day on for election day?
We don't, and it was conferences.
the history there.
Election day on the weekends.
But now we don't need to because of the new configuration.
Right.
And it was only Memorial School that had elections in it, so
Right.
it seemed like, I think, I can't speak for, the general populace. The one thing we all don't like about November is how choppy it gets. This doesn't give back time, but it does make the time more compacted and at least allows you to have 2.5 concentrated days, then the break, then a full week, and then the partial week again.
Do you guys feel like we can vote on that, or do you need to wait till next week? Teresa might have some good input. You want to wait until next week? 'Cause
Can
that's
wait.
another
Yep, let's wait
elementary
until
school
next week.
and middle school parent. Okay, we table that one for next week.
Sure.
By the way, you swipe and type the hit the bell icon if it's enough.
You what?
I swipe on the screen and hit the bell icon when you all send.
All right,
Minutes.
moving on. Do you want to go ahead and do the budget up, or do you want to keep talking about the school committee?
I'm just gonna give you the school committee calendar.
Okay.
And you can take a look at it. And we can solidify it next time. Essentially, just this year's calendar rolled forward. Big questions are going to be, how do we want to structure our summertime? And do we have any, I thought originally we were going to have school improvement plans presented at the end of the year. We have the 17th as our full meeting and then one on June 7th. I'm not seeing it happen in terms of time that we have in meeting. It may not be a bad idea. Our past practice had been beginning of the year, end of September, beginning of October, the principals would come, they would lay out the plan and outlook for the year, and it would roll that way. All the principals come to the meeting, everyone kind of gets to meet them, see them, and hear what's on the docket for the year, people kind of fresh. That might work well, knowing we're going through a turnover. And then what we had hoped to do this year, and then, COVID, I think, has lingered a little bit in terms of taking up time, was the spotlight presentations from the schools, knowing we have new people and we're going back to in-person meetings. It might be a nice idea to carry that forward. Essentially, every principal comes with a contingent from their school and just kind of highlights things that make their school special. So less about the core curriculum and the things we're trying to do the same throughout the district, and a little bit more on what the students are up to and what makes each building unique in its own culture. Those have been very well received in the past. So again, with a relatively large group of new people coming on board, it might be a nice year-long program to introduce people to the school in the district and people who work here. So we don't have to do anything with that right now. Typically, this is the time of year where we start to take a look and plan things out. So why don't we just take a look at it and then we'll come back to it next week? If you've got ideas, suggestions, or you see mistakes, just send them my way. And now we can talk budget update. Not much budget update, really.
No, but I think could you explain, do a little extra explanation of the excess and deficiency funds? Because that's one of the questions that's been coming up for people
Sure.
as we do this.
So
Sure.
can we do it in 2 stages? Can we just do like general FY23 budget? We still are carrying some assumptions. We're still waiting on state numbers. Has anything changed in terms of what we know tonight
No.
versus last week? Okay.
No budget changes, no surprises in that regard. Nope. The only, I think, operational thing that we want to get the school committee vote on is DOR's certification, Department of Revenue, certification of our excess and deficiency fund, which is one of our 3 main reserve pools. Basically, it's on the balance sheet. It's the sum of all prior year and leftover funds for budget surplus, essentially, in the general fund. The general fund is the taxpayer funded budget. It's called the general fund because it excludes everything else that's grants or revolving funds based on fees that you might be getting. A line fund, which we know, for example, is in deficit, that kind of thing. So just the general fund, every year they say how much you have. You can use that as a revenue. Some of that money is a revenue source. We've talked about mostly cons of using that type of one-time money as revenue source. But we have been doing that. We have a $520,000 line item in the revenue of our budget for using excess and deficiency funds. So after all of our ups and downs and discussion about how to balance the budget, we agreed that 520,000 was the amount of reserves that we were going to use to commit to the budget. And so technically speaking, that needs to be revoted once this DOR has certified the number. So that's really all we're doing and asking for that vote. And so if there's some background that I can provide to what those numbers are, et cetera, great. And want to make sure we get that accomplished as we're heading in town meeting. So the way the number starts is by looking at your fund balance, which is, you know, in accounting terms, is kind of like equity in a for-profit company. But we're not a for-profit company, it's called fund balance, which is generally, as I mentioned, if your revenue is above expectation and you don't need to spend all that extra revenue, you will have some leftover funds that would become part of fund balance. If you spend less than you expected, that would be savings. That would go to fund balance. If you have one is up, the other's down, they would offset. So it's really the sum of all revenue surplus and surplus and the plus all expenditure surprises. So really what you want to look at is changes from year to year. And so this year, the number for excess and deficiency of, just looking at the number, bear with me, 1.577 million is about $200,000 lower than it was a year ago. It's kind of what we would expect because we know that we've committed reserve funds already in prior years, $335,000. So in rough math, $335,000 of committed use to balance the budget, but E&D's only gone down 200,000. That would say we get about $100,000 better than expected on budget. And that's a very small percentage of our total budget. I know when we're in budget season, we're kind of getting down to 40s and $50,000, and every amount matters, and it does. But if you look at $100,000 on a $30 million budget, it's extremely tight. And those types of changes can happen in a matter of weeks based off of things like utilities or having multiple leaves of absence, for example, or we always know the health insurance is certainly a big number that could change things, or a change in out of district placement. So I would say those types of numbers are extremely tight, and on a full year basis, it's just very hard to know exactly where things are going to go. But I would say that that's the kind of level of gap that you'd want to have. You definitely don't want to ever have a situation where you have such low difference between budget and actual that you end up going over, which is statutorily illegal. It would require us to go to a special town meeting in both towns to vote a budget overage. And that happens in some communities if they have a catastrophic event budgetarily. We've never had that. I think we want to avoid that.
I think that happened to a lot of communities in COVID, actually.
Right.
Yes, so that's another thing. For example, we talked about the fact that we have about $200,000 roughly that we think will come out of reserve funds to cover COVID spending that we never went to taxpayers and asked for, and that we are not going to get paid back by CARES federal money because we're not eligible for that much. And so we made the strategic decision to not go to taxpayers and ask them to pay a separate assessment for COVID. Kept the doors open. It was very expensive, about $1.8 million. That's one example of what reserves allow you to do. Fortunately, we did get most of that reimbursed, but $200,000 is still a big hit. So it's certainly bigger than the numbers we're talking about here in terms of potential savings versus budget.
And sorry if I missed it. Is this as of
Fiscal 21 end.
Okay, all right.
21.
Okay, thank you. Do you know what you're projecting this year?
I mean, generally, the last time we did a budget estimate, we were less than, we were about 0.5% off of variance to budget. So that similar level.
Right.
That's 75 to 150.
From a layperson's perspective, the tighter we are at the budget building time, the more 20s and 40s and 50s we're pinching out, the lower that number is every year. Because there's less room for the unexpected leave of absence or the added para we might need because of a student.
The other thing just to be aware very quickly is that if you do have surplus in your general fund, they do look at any deficit in other funds. So I know we've had conversations, not the past year and a half, about the kind of recurring deficit in the food service program that we know is there because of the fact that we intentionally keep fees at a certain level that we think is reasonable, and we have program costs a certain amount to run. So that they deduct those deficits from your fund balance before they certify, because they want to make sure that you can cover any liability. So just something to be aware of, because I know at some point we're going to come back and talk to school committee about how this year ended and covering any deficit that's there in the food service again.
Any other budget questions? We're getting close to the 6:45 mark.
So
So we need a motion
Yep.
to,
What's the motion?
Oh,
it's
To-
right on the agenda.
would somebody like to make the motion as written on the agenda?
Can I say it just like that? Or?
Yeah,
Sorry, make a motion as.
to
Sorry.
include the,
Yep, let me actually pull it up. Sorry, I like to say as written on the agenda.
here you go.
Joe. Motion to include FY21 certified excess and deficiency funds as revenue source for the FY23 budget.
In the amount totaling $520,000.
In the amount totaling $520,000.
Seconded by Warnock.
all in favor? Aye. We don't have anything else, right?
I think we're done.
Okay, do we have any school committee comment? Teresa's not here because she's attending the Essex Board of Selectmen meeting tonight. She usually is good for a comment. No comment. All right, motion to adjourn?
Second.
I can't make the motion.
Second to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.